point, Chris. What's your relationship with the water?
I had parents who would take us backpacking when I was young. And my dad's unofficial creed was sort of if you saw a lake or a stream, you jumped into it. So I think it began with that. And we happen to live near the coast here in California. So we would go swimming in the Pacific, which can get a little bit chilly in the winter. But if you start young, it's just what you do. So I think I've always felt at home in it. I was never a swimmer, though. I always played land-based sports. So that's been one of the great joys of reporting this book was, learning more about actually swimming, how you do it, this community, all of that.
Oh, awesome. I love that you had the inbuilt relationship, with the water. But it's so interesting to me just as a teacher and a coach teaching lessons in adults. I commonly find people like, oh, I'm a strong swimmer. I love swimming. But then they really, how they carry themselves in the water is different. So anyway, tell me more. So what was it how did the research for this book kick off to get you interested into this whole world of swimming?
We were super fortunate that there's an editor at Simon Schuster. His name's Tim O'Connell. Maybe listening to this. He is a hardcore swimmer. And he's in, sort of midlife. He's got young kids. He's got a high pressure job. And he found this cold water swimming community. He's in Rhode Island, and he totally caught the bug. He was like, we go out in a group. It's our trial. We come out afterwards. We warm up. We have our tea, whatever it is. It is magical. And I think he saw this happening overseas at the same time, especially in the UK. This had become, wild swimming, as they call it there. A bit of a trend enough that maybe you could get it into consciousness. And here in the U.S., outside of the swim communities, it's more cold plungy. There's a bro-ish element to it, and I think Tim's idea, which he coordinated with my literary agents on, was what if we took this world and tried to find the characters and attach a narrative to it. And so they approached me about it, and at the same time, I had recently hit a point in my life where I couldn't do the sports I loved as much, which was mainly basketball, to be honest. I had been a low-level collegiate basketball player, and I just kept going. Like every league, on concrete, on asphalt, wherever it was, I was in for it. And I'd hit my mid-40s, and my body just revolted. It said, you put a lot of stress on these joints. And so I ended up having a hip replacement at age 42.
Wow.
And just kept trying to find ways to get on, to keep playing basketball. And so I was originally attracted to the cold water element of therapeutic athletic recovery. And so I had come to it through that lens of, cold plunges and going back and forth with heat as a way to keep me playing basketball. So when the editor and my agents approached me and said, what about this idea basically Born to Run, that barefoot running book, but let's do it for cold water. What do you think? And I was immediately intrigued, especially once I started to look at the types of personalities that are drawn to this, because they're so passionate and there's nothing performative about doing something. Like if you're going to be a marathon swimmer, you are doing it for some kind of internal reason, there's something deep going on there that is not necessarily for fame, for money, for outside attention. And I was fascinated by that.
Yeah, awesome. That's so cool. So then you get this idea to do this book, and then what's your first step?
I started in the athletic recovery world. So this was talking to, NBA athletes, NBA trainers. Steph Curry and the Warriors were big fans of it, and I'm based in the Bay Area. So it was good to talk to them and get a sense of it and look into the science and the research, and you read back and you learn this is something people have been doing for millennia, right? So we've often believed that the water, and especially cold water, was good for us. We just didn't quite know why. And the fascinating part is that there'd been research around it, but it was all about keeping us alive. It wasn't about benefits. It was like, essentially, please stay out of cold water because it can kill you. Yeah. And so we had, centuries of research around exactly how it would kill you and how you could keep people from dying in cold water. And it's only the last 25 years that anyone has started to study the benefits of it, at least in a scientific way. So my first step was just read everything I could, Read the studies, read the books. There's some amazing books out there, as you well know, on swimming, but fewer on sort of the science of cold water. It's like a niche scientific community. And there's a guy, Mike Tipton, I'm sure you're familiar with in the UK, who's done a lot of research around this. And then his protege, Heather Massey, has done amazing research around it. And then a Canadian researcher, Gordon Giesbrecht. So there's a handful of people who have studied this, but not at the level that hopefully we one day get to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Did you lean into any of the like Nordic culture, like the sauna culture in Finland and look there at all?
Yeah, one of the great joys of the book was being able to travel to these communities and see how each one embraced it. And so I was able to go to Finland and Norway and Denmark. And in Finland, as everyone knows, this is just something you do. There's like millions of saunas. There's more saunas or saunas, as they pronounce it, than cars in the country. And so you'd stay in a hotel, whatever it was. There was a sauna, and I was able to go to the Finnish Sauna Society, which is the oldest and sort of the most, I would say, well, hard to say the most passionate, but a very passionate community of people. And there they have all the different temperatures of saunas. And the one that was most memorable for me was 268 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about where you would, smoke pork ribs. So it was quite hot. And, you're doing it around all these people for whom this is normal. And you're all naked in this case. And, they have men's days and women's days. I was obviously there on a men's day. And then after you get hot enough, which doesn't take very long at that temperature, you walk out down this long jetty, and it's winter and it's cold. The air is cold, but it feels amazing now because you've been sweating so much, and you jump into the Baltic Sea naked. And that experience was profound in a lot of ways. Like, oh, this is so much better than there's anything wrong with being in like a fitness club and going back and forth, but it was so authentic, and you're around other people. And even after getting out of that cold water, you were still internally heated to the point where there'd be these men just lined up on a bench outside looking out at the sea naked, just having a chat. And I got it. I was like, okay, I see why this has become, it's community, it's nature, it's stress release. You feel great. Like literally you just want to go take a nap afterwards. So I totally got it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's beautiful. I remember reading The Finnish Way, and they talked about that leveling of the playing field. Just when you're all naked, you don't know who's the mayor and who's the sales rep or whatever,
Yes.
So you
Yeah.
can just be people bumping around with other people in beautiful nature. That sounds remarkable. But does that take us? So you started with the athletic recovery, and I swung you over to Finland. But take us on your journey. So where does this? So from athletic recovery, like how did you get into more of the? I mean, I know there's some ice swimming. So take us more into like where this goes.
So then it became, I'm going to report on this world, and in particular look into the athletic competitive elements, right? Because I think if you go polar plunging or go for a swim in a lake on a day, on a chilly day, it's a wonderful experience, and you'll enjoy doing it. But it's not necessarily that enjoyable to read an entire book about it. It's more like you do it, you don't necessarily read about it. And Roger Deacon wrote an amazing book, Waterlog, about doing this through the UK. So I was drawn to the different communities. And so I went and looked at a community who was using this for mental health, essentially, in the UK. And I was curious about the people who were doing this, perhaps to quiet some demons, the people who were the open water swimmers. There's a chapter that revolves around Sarah Thomas and marathon swimming, amazing competitors like Elaine Howley and the community element. But I felt like the part that really got at the how and the why questions people have would be the ice swimming, because it is so extreme and it's not something you just do. And I was really curious about what drove people to do it and what they found on the other side of it. I'm always drawn to those kind of stories. And so for that, I started looking into, the International Winter Swimming Association, the International Ice Swimming Association. And at first it was all research and doing Zooms and interviews. And eventually I got to the point where I was interviewing Joe Zomaitis, who is both an amazing marathon swimmer in the Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame, and also had gotten the caught with the ice swimming. So he's the U.S. national team coach for ice swimming, and he was explaining to me, look, our first U.S. nationals are coming up. This was in 2024. It's going to be outside of D.C. It's in a pool that's going to be chilled, 40 degrees or so, and it's actually an open. So we're trying to encourage more competitors. So as long as you can pass a physical and you know how to swim, essentially, you could compete. And if you're going to write about this world, you should probably try it. And that for me was sort of the fulcrum where I was like, okay, he's right. If I'm an outsider writing about this world where so many people have this base assumption that people are, quote, eccentric or crazy, and you come to it and you just stay on the outside, you don't gain authority with the reader. And then the reader can't experience it. So my hope was that by being an outsider who was not a swimmer, I've got terrible cold tolerance. I actually have Raynaud's, where your outside circulation in your fingertips and such goes almost immediately. So I was like, I can be this reader surrogate to take people through this. So I ended up starting to do this and training, and then I could explain to people both the benefits, the challenges, and then hopefully some of the psychology behind it.
Yeah, beautiful. Tell us what that was like. Without giving it all away. Of course, we want to read the book, but I guess just in the vein of your swim story, maybe this takes us as a nice segue to where you had this. You grew up jumping in the Pacific. You grew up backpacking and getting in lakes. So, and then the Raynaud's, I think, is an interesting one too. I've run into people all the time who that's a huge barrier. So, maybe some little tidbits.
Yeah, yeah. So I loved the water, and I'd always grown up around the water. I'd never really done any swimming, but I had when I'd have like a hip surgery, for example, you go to the pool, like that's where you go. But I never had any training around it. And I'll be honest, it was like a, sub-level pool at a YMCA in like 5 feet of super chlorinated water with no natural light, and you're sharing a lane. And I just didn't necessarily enjoy it. I was like, oh, I'm just doing this to recover so I can play the thing I want to play. So I loved swimming in Lake Tahoe just for fun with your friends, whatever it might be. But I hadn't really connected it. So part of my training was the swimming part of it. And then part of my training was I'd better start acclimating to this water if I'm going to get into 40-degree water. And those were separate. And because I live in the Bay Area, about as cold as it gets here is maybe 52 in the Bay. It might get down to about 51, 52 in the winter, which is plenty cold, as anyone knows who's if you're going to try to swim for an hour in 52-degree water and you're built like me, like you're going to feel it for sure. But if you're going to try to swim in 40-degree water, I need to get colder. So I found this like jury-rigged cold plunge tub that I could order that's essentially a giant cooler. It's called a grizzly cooler. And people use it when they go like deep sea fishing to keep their fish cold. But these two brothers in Texas found a way to jury rig it and add a filter and a chiller. And so it did the trick. It looks like I'm sitting in a giant cooler, but it does the trick. So I could start getting cold plunging that way. And then I would go out to the bay. My daughter joined me. She was very brave and came along and handled the cold better than I did. And then Tahoe was the other place I could go to get decently cold water. So that was like the cold acclimation. And then the swimming was, okay, I realized, psychologically for me, I wanted to find an outdoor pool. So there's one around here in El Cerrito, beautiful outdoor pool. El Cerrito is just a little north of Berkeley in the Bay Area, across the bridge from San Francisco. And some of the lanes are deep. It's, I don't know, like 12 feet deep. And the sun is out and everyone's out there swimming. And I really enjoyed that. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to train, this is where I'm going to do it. I started watching videos from experts. I listened to your podcast. I just consumed as much information as I could about all this. I wanted to learn how to swim in the bay, totally different challenges out there, which is natural for probably most of your listeners by now. But when you're starting out, it's like, oh, tides, current. Are the seals going to bite me? I don't know if they are. They're out there. And you're sort of figuring out, oh, how to sight. I got to pop my head up. So all this was novel to me. I hadn't really done it in a competitive way. So that was the lead up to sort of figuring out, two parallel tracks, get your body ready for this water, and then learn how to be a decent enough swimmer that I don't totally embarrass myself when I show up at, the U.S. Nationals against people who've swam the Triple Crown. These are legends. There's Ching Lee, who's a ice Iron Woman. So she has done both, an ice mile and an Iron Man. She's just like elite athletes. So that was my mindset going in.
Yeah. Wow. Did you trying to figure out where to dig into this because there's the general prep, but I'm wondering about, so let's just talk about this. So you've the love of swimming, and then there's all these factors to getting in the bay, getting in Lake Tahoe, it's like, but what are you doing to, like, I guess, adapt your semblance of a swimming technique to, you said you were consuming a lot. You're just taking YouTube videos and like, go try that. Is that kind of how you're doing it at this pool?
Part of it, and it ends up being a chapter in the book about this. I also had a bad shoulder from
Oh,
years of, tennis and throwing football, all that. So an arthritic right shoulder. So I found at first I was doing sprint training where you put the head down and you go into that, that Superman pose and you just blast away. And I really enjoyed it and it felt great, but not so great on my shoulder.
yeah.
So I had to find a way to start logging some more mileage without blowing out the right shoulder. So that was a separate challenge that I entered. So I was doing that simultaneously with just trying to understand technique that, just the basic concept that you think kicking your legs a lot is a helpful thing. But it really matters how you kick your legs.
Yes.
And in some ways, if you're going to do longer swims, you don't even want to kick your leg. Like all these counterintuitive things that you learn in the history of the crawl as a stroke. It was all fascinating, finding that a lot of it is about how you move through the water, watching videos of people who did this well, effortless swimming, which is a great podcast and video from an Australian coach. He was super helpful watching it. I ended up going and training a little bit with Adam Walker, who had a similar experience with his right shoulder, in his case, biceps, and he still swam the Ocean 7 after doing it. And he has created a modified stroke that's not too dissimilar from total immersion, if you're familiar with that. Some of the people have come to this on their own. They call it the forever stroke, but it's really around body rotation and sparing the shoulder. And so that was helpful as well. So I'm just like consuming as much as I can and then testing it out and seeing what worked for me. And, everybody's different.
Yeah, that's for sure. For sure. Some of the human instincts that we have, though, aren't different, and the number of joints we have, so it's fascinating to me, just like I said, as a what I run into coaching this stuff and coaching people for longer distances and keeping the shoulders safe and all of that. I'm curious what events you chose to swim for your first national championship that's open to everybody. What did you decide to go for?
Oh, there's no way I was going to try anything other than freestyle. I just didn't
Yeah.
have the technique. So I did the 50 free, the 100 free, and then a couple relays, which were a lot of fun. I didn't
Yeah.
expect the relays to be that much fun, but that chance to do an individual sport and have a team element was just, I really enjoyed that. So basically short sprints. But for me, the idea of 100 meters in 39-degree water, that didn't feel short at all.
Ooh, it's not really short for anybody. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, the sprint part was going to be fine. I wasn't worried about the swimming. It was just, okay, am I going to start hyperventilating? What's going to happen? I never actually got a chance to swim in water that cold prior to going to nationals. The coldest I got was like 46 degrees in Lake Tahoe in the winter. And I remember it did not go well. I was like, I can't imagine doing this in actually 40 degrees. One of the big differences, though, is I did that without a cap or goggles. And
Oh,
so there
wow.
is a pretty big immediate reaction in the face, your trigeminal nerve right here, among others. So it does help to have a cap and goggles on.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's very true. Um, let's backtrack to, like, so you've got the open water elements for cold tolerance, mainly the pools where you're kind of honing your technique. And you mentioned some of the things about getting used to like the whether a seal's going to bite you, or like the having to sight, all these things. Were there any resources or consistent, like anything you found that kind of really supported you in that transition from, like, okay, I want to do this, I need to get some cold tolerance, it's like, or were you just kind of like, just try it and see what you find out?
So a lot was finding resources. So, Lynne Cox has got an amazing open water swimming book. Steve Minotona has wrote one as well that's helpful. Dan Salmonelli down in, so all this whole community that exists, and you could find, listening to your podcast, listen, I was trying to learn as much as I could and then through the interviews. So obviously I'm interviewing people for the book. And the problem I ran into is when you interview, say, Joseph Midas, he treats this like it's just nothing. It's so easy. He's like, oh, and then I swam 12 hours and I did this. And it's like, wait, back up.
Right.
Uh, so we got to go, micro. Let's go through this step by step, explain to someone for whom this does not feel easy or familiar. So a lot of my process was trying to slow people down and say, let's return to before you did this. And so I found there was a lot of swimmers who came to this because they just always been in the pool. So they grew up around the pool.
Mm-hmm.
And this was just something they did. But maybe there was a point where they moved to open water. So that was really interesting to me. Like, what took you from the pool to open water? Then there were people who hadn't been swimmers and found a community or found a late life sport. So they had a different track. And then there are some for whom it was more I have done X, Y, and Z. I've ticked off these boxes, these amazing endurance challenges. Oh, wait, there's something called a nice mile. That's catnip to someone because there's only fewer than 1,000 people in the world have ever achieved this. More fail than succeed. There's a personality type for whom it's like, I'm in. I got to do that. And there's personality types for whom it's like, never in a million years what I want to do. That probably the majority of human beings would have that response. So I was looking for those people for whom it was immediately like, yes, I want to do that.
It's interesting you point out the like tracking back, getting someone who's got all this experience to track back to like, but what was it like when you started, or how do you get someone going in this? Because that in there, like you said, Lynn and Steve, there's some great resources out there, but I think that it's hard when even with so much information to figure out like the first step. So how did you decide how much cold tolerance to do, how much pool swimming to do to get yourself to this cold champion open water national championship?
Yeah, I would say the showers are the great start for anyone. Maybe you like swimming in a pool and you want to start with cold. And the easiest way to do it is to go hot shower and then end on cold.
Mm-hmm.
If you go read the books that Ian Fleming wrote about James Bond, that's what he does in the books. It's sort of like that little boost you get at the end. So that helps you start with the cold showers. Though, interestingly, a cold shower, I think, is far less enjoyable than actually going into water.
Yeah.
Because it's only hitting part of your body. It's not much fun, right?
Yeah.
So, for me, it was like, I'll go in the bay. I like going in the bay. Already, I enjoy swimming out there. So that was an easier way to enter. And then I still need to get down to 39 degrees. So that's the cold plunge tub that I got that goes down to 39. But even then, you can't swim in it. You're just sort of sitting in there. And it's like chilling a bottle of Gatorade or something, and you're the Gatorade. And so you go in it. But it was combining the two that was the challenge, and not being able to predict how my swim stroke might change based on the physiology of getting cold. And one of the things you quickly learn is that all the usual impediments to swimming based on body type get essentially magnified by cold. So I'm relatively lean. So my whole fight all along has been keeping my hips up.
Yeah.
I'm sinking in the water. And in a sprint, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. But anything longer, it's like keeping my hips up, keeping the head down, hips up is what I'm always telling myself. Whereas if your body fat distribution is a little more equal, men tend to get it just in their gut, which isn't very helpful. Women have a better distribution, so you're more likely to get to the point where you're sort of hitting buoyancy, helpful. But all that, you get in the cold, and you're going to lose that power in your legs pretty quickly within, like 5 or 6 minutes. You're going to lose the feeling in your fingers. So people talk about clawing up. I'm not sure. I'm sure you've experienced it, right? Where you and then you're sort of just hoping your stroke looks good. So all those elements came down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy to think about for me to think about your journey. Do you did you end up, so you go to the nationals? I don't know if you want to take us there or if that's in the book or have you, I'm most curious too, like, have you been continuing on your journey and continue swimming? So maybe decide where you want to go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Like I wasn't certain going in whether this would be a project that I took on for a number of years. And I've written about a lot of interesting little corners of the world. I wrote a long 10,000 word story on homing pigeons once, right? I'm fascinated by these cultures of people that are very passionate about something. So I wasn't sure what it'd be like with this ice swimming culture and in general, but I have kept swimming, and I now find it is crucial, both physically because I can play basketball, but then if I'm doing other training in the water, it's so much easier on my body. I really enjoy that, moving meditation element of it. When you get to a point where you feel comfortable in the water, and even if it's like half an hour, I can just sort of get lost a little bit and get in that flow state. So I enjoy that. I enjoy the communal aspect, being out in nature, and then the cold part of it. I start every day in a cold plunge tub, and I know some people love it, some people don't, but for me, it really works. It will be like I've got teenage daughters, they head off to school or whatever it is. You do a, cold plunge, you start your day, and that next 2 hours of work is almost always my most productive because your body is flooded with, noradrenaline and dopamine and basically like opioids. But at the same time, you are calm because your resting heart rate has gone down. So it's like a 2 hour window where I feel great.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that help. I was going to ask what do you mean by works, but that helps me interpret that. I've heard of it also. Some people using it for more of a kind of an active recovery, like midday or a reset to get another kind of flow block. Have you ever tried it like more than once a day?
For sure. Like I found sometimes I'm a guy who's literally writing a book about this, and I'll be like stuck on something, or I'll just feel crappy. And I'm like, I can look at my window at like the cold plunge is like, you're the guy writing the book. Why don't you go do it? Or just get out of the house and go on a hike helps too, but go down to the bay, jump in the water, go to the pool, whatever it is, like 100 out of 100 times, I feel better. You got to remind yourself that's how I'm going to feel. And that's the biggest impediment to most people, I think, with this is it's really hard to predict how you'll feel about it. There's some people who are like, oh, I just hate cold water, or I don't like swimming or whatever it is. And it's like, you may not like it when you first get in. You may not even love it when you're actually in there, but just report back to me, 10 minutes afterwards, how you feel. And if you don't like that, then it's not for you. But for most people, they will sort of grudgingly admit at first that, yes, I do enjoy, I'm glad I did that thing.
Absolutely. Are there people that you talk to who tried like some amount of cold plunging and like it just wasn't for them? There's like they had to find other ways to kind of clear their head and move forward.
Yeah, yeah, and part of it, I was always curious about this because I'll be honest, the cold, getting into the cold was never that hard for me. I think partly because I grew up, jumping in the bay, and partly I don't have like a really negative reaction to it. I can't stay very long. I'm not great. I shiver a lot after, but the actual getting in. I enjoy that burst, but for some people, it's genetic. So we're sort of genetically either a warmie or a coldie. And so
Interesting.
if you are not someone who's genetically predisposed to this, it will be harder. So it's easy for one person to say, hey, I did this, why is it so hard for you? But they probably feel it very differently than you might. And they may not get the same benefit afterwards because psychologically, it was so challenging for them that even though their body feels good, they're almost like psychologically, like a tiny little slice of trauma from this experience. So when I looked into the recovery aspects with the Golden State Warriors, for example, there were a lot of the players on the team who loved doing this. They do hot, cold contrast therapy. Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson. This is a few years ago. But there are two players where the trainer was like, I don't even recommend it for them. Andrew Wiggins is one and Kevon Looney was another because it was such a negative experience for them that it outweighed any physical benefits they would get from it. Like it's like a little like shot of trauma in the middle of your day, which no one needs. Like you're opting into this.
Interesting. Yeah, that the mindset piece of it is fascinating to me. Even when I like started this podcast, when it was Marathon Swim Stories, I've always wondered, is it like a switch that that someone can just flick? And for some people I've worked with who are marathon swimmers, it has and then they need to build some cold tolerance because they decide to go swim across Tahoe. They can just literally turn it like a switch, and like they hated the cold, they didn't like it, and then they're just able to start doing it, and they put it in their routine, and it like blows my mind how easy it is for them. And then there's, but I know what you mean though. I've definitely met people where it would be more of a trauma, but I always want to track things back to like, but why? But why? Why can't we all just mentally? I don't know. Did you get into any of that in the book?
Yeah, and I think it's very similar to I have friends for whom running is just a really negative experience. If they see everyone going jogging, they're like, good for them. But I just hate it. I never get the runner's high. I'm never happy afterwards. And I think it's one of those inbuilt things where we're going to self-select usually to the easiest route. And so your choice is okay, easiest route might be sitting on the couch and watching Netflix in like a well-heated house. That's probably not good for us. So of the range of things that are going to be physically challenging and beneficial for us, let's pick the one that we also will find enjoyment in. And I think that's where like especially open water swimming seems to be a bridge too far for some people. And I can relate to this where you're just like, what's beneath me? You're out there. There's other, as Elaine Howley said, there's things with teeth down there. And so you're thinking like that part of it may just be a bridge too far, but there's other things you can do. You go swim in a lake. It could be a lake, and then you're perhaps less worried about that. So there's always, I think, derivations off of that. But I was just curious in part about why it was that people would choose this particular endurance sport. And you can attest to this. I'd be curious your take because it is such a radically internal experience. If you think about running, you can go with a running group, right? But when you go to a swim group, you aren't actually talking to them while you swim. Not only that, you're staring straight down. And if it's dark water, you're basically staring into darkness. You've got earplugs in, so you're not really hearing very much.
Right.
And then if you do that for hours, it's just like there's no trees, there's no sunshine, there's no some people listen to music, but I wouldn't do that in the open water, obviously. So it has to be this like really personal experience. And for some people, that's appealing, and for others, it's not. So I'd be curious your take on this sort of radically internal element.
Yeah, it's a good question. As you're saying that, I'm going through like when I was in Loch Ness and the darkness versus when I swam. Waitukabuli was the length of this island in the Caribbean where it was more blue. It was like we were just too deep to see much. But I think, but personally, I'm just a radically internal person. So I like, and I've coached people who are much more social, and for them, sometimes the hardest bit of it is to not be socializing constantly. At the same time, though, it's like I crave the interaction with somebody at a feed time, like as short as it is, and as short as you want it to be. Even just that check in, even if it's like 10, 15 seconds, it's like it's like this little like light of humanity. And you're just like, oh, okay, we're here. Everything's fine. Because even in that 30-minute feed window, it's like you can get pretty negative and just having like a contact with someone else. Or there's people that'll sit on the boat and they just like look at you and they're smiling and it makes you smile inside. But it is, I think, but the like the peaks and valleys and like the whole experience, it is like that is what it is for me. Like I love that, and I love how it brings together. I don't know, like the agelessness quality of being in the water, and it's like the past, the present, the future. Everything mixes together, and you're just life. You're like living and watching the earth turn and the sunrise, and like to me, that's what I do it for. Saying all that, I'm like, I gotta go swimming.
Yeah, talking to Sarah Thomas about it, she talked about the idea of like, no one can reach me on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no email. Like I'm fully detached from the things that might provide little stressors. And at the same time, she talked about, the mental resilience and the comfort you get with yourself through it, because she says, there's nothing you can say to me that I haven't like thought about myself.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's essentially like years of therapy in the water. I've had the darkest thoughts you can imagine, and I've worked them through, and you come out the other side. And so I feel like these swimmers I meet are incredibly mentally strong.
Mm-hmm.
I kept on being amazed by Joe Zamaitis again as an example, but he's like multitasking. He's got, infant children. He's a national team coach. He runs his own swim program in Phoenix, Arizona. He appears like he never sleeps, and he was always here. Like I described it as like an airplane pilot vibe in the book, because I think partly because he's done all this hardcore marathon swimming, it's hard to ruffle the guy. Like he's been through it all.
That's when my kids were little and I was swimming across Tahoe and nursing babies and all kinds of crazy things. Yeah, it was definitely like the swimming balanced me out for the life with with kids because I thought of it as like the bucket that I was filling for myself, so that I could come home and be the best mom that I could be. But even then it's like, yeah, you do. It's hard to ruffle. You just have this kind of baseline understanding. I talk about with my swimmers. It's training. Like the highs and lows that you have in your life is training for the highs and lows that you'll have when you're in the water. So someone gets laid off or you pick up a new job or your kid's sick. It's like, it's all mental training. I think actually that was from a book, Travis Macy. He has a book called Ultra Mindset and it's all good mental training. And that was a good one for me to be reading when my kids were really tiny. So
Oh, I
the middle of
imagine,
the night
right?
wake ups. Yeah. All of it.
Yeah, that was something Jared Kennedy, the Irish ice swimmer, mentioned to
Mhm.
me. Is he had gone through like a divorce and he had his own hip replacement and sort of these midlife challenges. And his theory sounds like same as Travis's was essentially some of the reasons that older people do so well in endurance sports is because they've gone through all these things in their life. And essentially, the more hard shit you do, the easier it is to do hard shit. You know, that this is like a muscle that you've built
Yeah.
as you do this. And sometimes, obviously we don't want to encourage bad things to go through in life or hard things. So that's one of the routes you can do if you're doing a marathon swim or an ice swim or whatever it is that you are essentially think of it as like training, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Well, man, I'm at a loss of what else to ask you because I don't want to give away too much and I just can't wait to read the book. But I don't know, any other kind of big revelations or what surprised you the most? How about that, about your research?
I think it was the power of the community. I guess you sort of naturally think of swimmers as it's an individual sport, right? So from the outside, my preconception was, Michael Phelps, like these swimmers, and I'd heard of, maybe like Diana Nyad and Lynne Cox, like very much an outsider perspective where I wasn't familiar with this world. And I thought of people taking on big solo attempts or racing in a pool, and then you're super competitive against the people against you. And then I actually come into this world, and it is like the most cohered community, like the group up in Vermont around Memphis Magog that Phil White has helped create, and all those people. Oh my goodness! Like these people would like, like if you're like, my so and so kicked me out, they'd be like, stay with me for 6 months, like whatever. It's like I have rarely met a group of people that is as inclusive, as welcoming, and it doesn't really matter. Like, you're a swimmer, come on in, right? That continually surprised me. I think part of it might be, and you can speak to this far more than I can, but the element of crewing.
Mm.
If you're going to go for a run, you don't need four other people to go with you while you go for a run. I mean, maybe if you're doing like a crazy ultra marathon, right, you get a support van. But for most of us, you just go for a run and that's it. And with a swim, like you need people there who are selflessly caretaking for you, feeds, a boat, everything. In ice swimming, you need a second, it's called. And that's just someone who watches over you and afterwards is probably going to strip your swimsuit off. And so there's a level of intimacy you get to like very quickly, a reliance on other people. And it's like, that's hard to get in our modern life. We're so like siloed. And so that's the part that I was like, I'm coming back for that. Like this community is amazing and they look out for each other. There's no expectation. I don't think anyone's trying to get, fame or glory out of this. It's sort of a communal vibe.
Yeah, the word coming to me is like there's authenticity. Like I think it was
Mm-hmm.
when I interviewed Michelle Macy, she talked about just being, you're half naked, jumping into like the coldest element, and she was speaking of like the English Channel or something. It's like you're just mostly naked jumping into the elements and it's like you're completely putting yourself out there. So people need to respond with kindness and openness. And that is, that just isn't there's more facades and other things. So yeah, I think that's my theory as to what builds that community, is just that we're so vulnerable. We make ourselves so vulnerable. That's how I feel, I think, in a big swim like that, where you're completely trusting these people to look out for you, and they're there because they love it. They're not, like you said, they're not looking for anything. And it's blown me away at every turn that I've needed a crew and found people at the last minute and hardly knew them. And and they're, putting Desitin on my butt or whatever, before you go swimming. Like, really? Nobody thinks twice about it when you're in it. But it's an interesting thing trying to to allow that, right? As a human, just allow yourself to be that vulnerable.
Yeah, there are a couple people I met who specifically mentioned that they were caretakers in their life. They cared for others. And one of the reasons they particularly liked ice swimming and marathon swimming, but ice swimming in particular, is you get to a point where you literally need other people to care for you. Like if you were to try to swim, a kilometer in that water, and you get out, and I both witnessed this and experienced it myself. You get on the beach, like if there's not someone to take care of you, and it's the middle of winter, and you just got out of a 25-minute swim in ice water, you're screwed. And so you literally need these people there to take care of you. And so voluntarily putting yourself in position, if you caretake for other people's, where you are receiving care, can be very hard to do. It's hard, especially in day-to-day life, unless you get sick, which is not something obviously anyone wants to do. So this was a draw for them, was to get to that point where you push past your limits, and at the same time you knew people had your back. And it's like, sounds like a very simple thing, but also a very powerful thing.
Yeah, I think I wrote a post once called "I Can Do It Myself," because I've always thought I could do everything myself. And the reason that I keep going back to do really long, crazy swims is to remind myself that I need people. And that literally could not do it without them. I need them to get me, because I literally, but to remind myself that I need other people and to quit thinking that I've got all figured out, it seems obvious, but it's an interesting thing. I think I grew up in the swimming thinking, I could figure everything out, whatever, as in the solo sport, even though it's a team kind of mentality of competitive swimming. And it's just an interesting thing to try to break out of the thinking that I can do it. Yeah, I believe that we're the hive mind, but that doesn't help me in my day-to-day of thinking that I can figure out everything I need to do to whatever, put my podcast, whatever, run my business, So it's that little reminder.
I wonder if swimming in general attracts do-it-yourselfers.
Yeah,
is
me
there
too.
like a personality? I wonder if that's part of it. And this is forcing those do-it-yourselfers to okay, this is going to be a team effort, even if for only a little bit. The rest of your training, you can do it yourself. But for this moment, you need a team.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I'll be the next book. Right, Chris? Oh, man. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm so excited to read your book, and I really appreciate you sharing a little bit about what's in there. I feel like it's a tidbit of when I started this podcast, it's more like the marathon swimming, why do people swim marathons? And I feel like that you're starting to answer that. So I can't wait to give it a read.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. And also, as I mentioned, this podcast was instrumental early on in helping me understand this world. So thank you for all of that.
I appreciate that a lot. Thank you, Chris.